Ta-da! Final table. Okay, and we have Pocky 10s to start things off. I like where this is going. Oh, we see a... Oh, we see a wall. It's actually a bit scary, isn't it? We see a raise here and a call. This is a bit confusing. This is a little bit like that situation we saw before with Daisy. We've got the min raise from the cutoff and the big blind almost... Well, it is a reclick, isn't it? And they're short. They've only got M5 and they've just reclicked it. So this is very similar really to the Daisy flat call. Although it is a 3-bet, not a flat. Daisy just flatted off, I think it was an M4. Well, similar really, 4 or 5 stacks. So the question that we asked ourselves was, what do we know about this player? Because the range that we assign is going to depend heavily on whether we think they're a recreational player or a reg. A reg here, a reg-ish player would probably only do this with monsters. Whereas because I mean, if they've got 6s, they're just going to shove, right? If they've got ace-9, they're just going to shove. So why are they just offering their opponent 1,800 to call with 14,000 in? They get like, what's that, a 7 over 7 to 1 for them to call? Why would they do that with a hand like King 10 suited? It just doesn't make any sense, really. They would probably just want to jam and end the hand, especially since Nutty could just be stealing from the cutoff. They've got a little bit of fold equity with their stack. And so it's just small 3-betting doesn't really make much sense unless they've got the nuts and they're just dying for a call. But I'm not convinced that that's the case. But at the same time, I'm not sure enough that I just want to slam it in here. The other thing about just calling too is if we make it here, say we make it 11 or 12 and try to commit against go slow, sorry, and Nutty then shoves on us, that's a pretty disgusting situation. So if we flat and then Nutty makes it 20k and then go slow snap calls, we can probably just fold. So I don't mind the way I've played this. The other thing is too is that Nutty potentially from other hands in this tournament, I think we could assume the way he's played, he's not necessarily a top pro or anything. So that we might be able to get value from him post flop with our 10s in a side pot, even if go slow does happen to have, you know, the rockets or some sort of monster. So I don't mind the way we've played this, especially since it is the start of the final table. We can just be a little bit careful here with our stack rather than just get in a big confrontation with Nutty. I mean, even if he had ace-king, it's not a great spot to be in a flip for busting 9th when you're, third against the 3rd and 4th stacks at the start of the final table. But once the flop goes check, 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 which was pretty surprising, we have to bet turn because we need to protect our hand. We do have a heart as a bit of backup. Go slow could check aces or kings on the flop. That flop is so good for aces, especially if you have the ace of hearts as well. It'd be pretty tempting just to check it back. I would, personally. Not that I would do the mini 3-bet pre-flop. Well, I don't know, I might sometimes, I guess, if I'm against the fish that I think just is going to give me value and then just play terrible post and I'm in position, I might, I guess. But it doesn't really feel like that now. It feels like they're just being a little bit fishy. And they could have just broadways or ace-9, didn't want to get it in pre or something like that. So I think it's in our interest to protect our hand, and also we do have a heart as a bit of backup. We could get value if Go Slow raised ace-jack and has his heart. They might call or jam. And they both fold, which is good, because I didn't really want to see Nutty. Definitely didn't want to see Nutty raise the turn there. But they were kind of handcuffed because they had Go Slow still behind. And we look like we have a pretty strong range when we just cold call the 3-bet out of position there. So not too surprisingly, they just folded there. And Go Slow was getting good odds pre-flop. So I could imagine Go Slow calling with, King Jack and maybe suited connectors and stuff like that. Maybe tiny pairs. 7-9 here, and I opt to limp. And we get raised by Vegans. And we're getting 2.5 to 1 here to call. We have a 1-gap suited against another deep stack, so definitely going to be calling. This is part of the reason why I limp this hand. At the same time, I didn't want to raise and have the big stack be able to get leverage against us, put pressure on. We flop bottom pair with no backdoors other than, we do have a backdoor straight if it comes 6-8 or 6-8, well, or Jack 8, but that would be the bottom end. So I think in this situation where we don't really have a lot going on backdoor and we have bottom pair, I think it's okay just to be folding, because even if we do have the best hand, we're just at the mercy of the deck, mercy of the big stack, and check raising out of position here against the big stack in this spot doesn't sound very appealing on this board. Wouldn't really be ripping too much that we've limp called with. Ace 9, would we limp call with that? 9-10, I guess, 9-10 or clubs. So I'm just going to fold and give him that one and not try and do the impossible or anything. Jack Queen here, we see a 3-bet on the button. I like this play. We've got an M11 stack from the cutoff open, so we get good leverage, and we're in position with a couple of Broadway blockers and a hand that plays pretty nicely if we do get called and have to see a flop, and we'd be in position. So I think that's good play. I prefer that over flatting, I think, because if we get a squeeze behind, we probably have to give it up, and I think that the cutoff is just range is wide enough that we just get a profit immediately enough of the time, because they're just going to fold. That playing it that way is good. And if they do opt to call a 3-bet out of position, then we can punish them for that, and we have a nice playable hand that's got decent smooth equity distribution anyway. So Queen 5, no thank you. King 9, don't mind the open here. Get a defend, and we've had a lot of these dry flops, haven't we, when we've gone to the flop and we just got the c-bet. This hand is probably even nicer to c-bet than the other ones we had, because we've got 2 overs with a backdoor flush. Well, I mean, it's similar, isn't it? What am I talking about? It's pretty similar. Go slow, folded the big blind there. That's that guy that was on our table before. That seems a little bit on the active side, that Der Einser. Ace 9. And we're going to walk. Okay, that's fine. Do it the easy way. Wow, interesting hand here. We get 4.5x open from this guy down here. We haven't seen really in any hands, have we? I don't think so. And it looks like he's kind of committing himself to the pot, because he's put in a quarter of his stack already. It does feel a bit sort of 8-ish, pocket 8s, but at the same time, I don't want to call. We're only getting, well, we're not getting terrible pot odds, 1.8 to 1, but we're going to have an SPR of 1.5 out of position on the flop, and he's representing a pretty strong range, I think, with that raise. Yes, it is just an open, but it is a quarter of his stack. My best guess would be that he's a recreational player that doesn't really want to see a flop. He's got a hand that's got pretty good raw equity. He just wants to end the hand, and he doesn't want any silly business on the final table that busts him in 9th, because he's pretty proud he's got this far. And he wants to go just a few steps further to get some more money and build his bankroll. So he's gone ahead and just smashed it with pocket 8s, or maybe ace 10 or something, just saying, hey guys, just give me this one. Don't make my life difficult. Having said that, I guess I wouldn't hate, well, I wouldn't hate a call. I wouldn't hate a 3-bet, but I think folding is, and just avoiding that situation and being out of position. I feel getting it in is probably a bit loose, and I feel calling is a bit dirty, because we're against a guy who's looks like he's got a strong hand. We'll be out of position, and we're not. I feel like we're not hitting the flop enough, and we're not guaranteed enough to have the right equity that we can try and speculate there out of position, because the pot already, would be, the SBR would already be so low on the flop. Seems pretty aggressive, this guy. I know we haven't seen that many hands, but the small blind here, I think I recognize his name as well as a reg that's pretty aggressive. So we're going to have to keep our eye on that Vegans guy, M.Vegans. Ace 3. It's a really bad flop. You could definitely just check here. Looks like I have checked. I don't mind a delayed bet here. Oh, I just realized he's oh so short now. He's oh so short. Yeah, he's only got 4-5. He's only got M2. So actually, I like the way I played this. I think we can just check flop. It's a pretty bad flop if we don't really want to get it in. Even the SPR is only 1. Even if he has 9-7 with the 7 of hearts, I mean, we're just such a huge dog against that particular hand that getting it in isn't that appealing. It's just such a bad board for this hand. Having said that, once he checks again turn, I think he gets a green light to fire on the turn with any hand that has equity. So if he's got king 2 with the king of hearts, I think he should be jamming. I think he's going to jam turn, especially because he does seem like a player who's been pretty active. So I think he's not going to shy away from semi-bluffing. And he knows that we could be very weak in this spot once we check flop. We could just be giving up on a bad board. However, when we hit the 10 and he fails to semi-bluff or protect his hand, if he's got a hand like 8-9, I think he shoves. Because he's just so short. He's definitely just going to go with anything that has decent equity. So I think he's probably got something like king 6. Well, even that's a gutser. What's he got? He's probably got like 4-5 off or something like that. And I think now since he hasn't bet, we can just slam it in and he's going to fold a lot. We do probably have the best hand now and it's probably worth protecting it. If he did call, I think he'd almost have to have a big hand. It wouldn't make sense for him to have a queen or a 9 here because I think he's just going to protect that. So I think for him actually to call here, he's probably going to show like, well, flush to be honest. He's probably going to show like, you know, king 2 of hearts or something. But most of the time he's just going to fold and that's what he does. Because it wouldn't make much sense for him to just... It just doesn't make sense for him not to protect his hand, and that makes no sense for him to check call with a hand that's on draw, because he would just prefer to jam it and use his fold equity with his hand. That's just what I'm getting at there. He does go for it now, and he does lose to Dr. Boom. Interesting here. I really feel like this player's getting a bit out of line here. It's a really nice spot. We've been pretty active. And I think this is a really good spot to 3-bet. So our options are to fold, which is fine, to call, which is 6,000. We're getting 3-1. I don't hate it. But we do have a pretty mediocre hand. It's not too bad, though. Calling is probably fine. The other option is to get a bit aggressive and 4-bet it and make it something in the vicinity of, say, 25,000, which I think is a good option as well. If we think our opponent is attacking us with a pretty wide range, which I do believe that's possible. So I wouldn't mind a 4-bet to 25, 26,000, something like that. We get really good leverage. We apply a lot of pressure. We have really high bubble factors in this situation. So it's one of those situations where it's sort of a game of chicken because both of us don't want to be the next to bust. That's because there's still a few short stacks out there. Well, shorter stacks, i.e. the whole table. So, yeah, I think that's all options are pretty viable there. And I've gone with the option that I guess is on the safe side. I feel like we've got a pretty good edge at this final table, and I guess I didn't want to 4-bet and have to spew off 26k, a quarter of our stack, and I think calling out a position against a player who seems to know what he's doing is a little bit risky at the final table with king 6 suited. And so I think that's folding there and just saying, okay, well, we've got over 100k. We've still got over M20, a pretty good edge at the table. Let's just continue to work that and not just take a big risk in one hand. I think that's fine. We see him getting more chips there. We see him 3-betting and calling off here with 10-jack. Interesting to note that he 3-bet against UTG there. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of this play, I guess. It does look very strong because you commit to the big blind. They've only got M2. It kind of looks really strong. And you've got good equity if they do commit anyway. And you're against UTG. So this is one of those hands where it's kind of a bit meta game, in the sense that you're really trying to rep a huge range and get your opponent here to lay down a hand like sevens or ace jack. You're getting them to try and fold the top of their range because you're repping such a strong hand. And 10 jack is a hand, I guess it's not too bad to do that with. You've got a couple of good blockers. You block pocket 10s and jacks. And if you do get called by the big blind, you've got equity. And if you do get called by the UTG player who's getting 6,000 to win 20, so they're getting better than 3 to 1. If they do happen to call with a hand like king queen, well, you know, you're not in a terrible spot. So yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. I just think it's potentially it could be better spots to try it, but it does work out pretty well for him. He gets the UTG player to fold, and he actually wins against ace-8, so he probably thought he was a genius at the time. It did go his way, and I don't hate the play, but I don't know. It depends a lot on that opener UTG. I mean, if he's a guy, sometimes you see these guys at final tables that like to open from UTG in early position because they like to steal from there because they think they get a lot of credit. If he's one of those guys, then it's probably a good play. But we don't have reason to suspect that from Awing, Ao1ing, however you want to say his name. We get a jam here from an M8 stack, folding there. Ace-3, fold against this guy who I haven't seen in any pots yet and opened UTG. Pocket 4s, Dr. Boom opens UTG. I think calling is pretty good here. There's already 9k in the pot and he's got 55 behind, so that's 64,000 we can potentially get our hands on. So we're getting, what's that, 13 to 1? Oh, it's only 4 to call. Oh, we're getting more than that. We're getting, what's that, like 16 or 17 to 1, something like that. So we're definitely getting the right price, and he has opened from UTG, so he's likely to have a strong hand that's going to give us, you know, action. I mean, he could easily have something like queens or jacks. Flop comes, you know, 10, 7, 4, and we go to happy land and win a big pot. The other thing is too is that I don't think we're going to see a squeeze very often. Even though the small blind player has been pretty aggressive, I don't think he's going to suddenly now put out a crazy squeeze because Dr. Boom has been solid and he's opened from the 1 hole. And so I think we get to see a flop a high percentage of the time, and we're against a strong range, which means we get paid off a high percentage of the time. So I think it's okay here. The other thing is too that, well, funnily enough, I was just going to mention it, and it has potentially happened, is we could just get situations like this where we don't flop our set, but we still have a chance to win. Now, you've got to be a little bit careful in this spot because of the negative implied odds. You don't want to take out a situation that was profitable and then throw a whole lot of chips, you know, start throwing them around like confetti when you get situations that aren't great for your hand. Your number one priority should be to try and flop a set. That's why they call them speculative hands. However, you have to be ready with your plan B. And plan B is when you get checked to, a lot of the time in this spot, your opponent has got a hand that they just don't want to continue with, especially on this board. They know that you are going to call against an UTG open with a pretty solid range. They know that this board is pretty good for your range, and they've just decided, okay, I'm just not going to invest any more money in this pot. Dr. Boom's also seen us be pretty active, so I think that might be weighing in his mind as well, a little bit of fear equity. Some opponents will check call here with ace-king and ace-queen, which is pretty risky for them, I mean. I'm not a huge fan of that play on this board. I think they're probably better off just c-betting because they can get blown off their hand too easily. So in this situation, I definitely want to bet because it looks like we have the best hand now, and there's already 13 out there. And we get pretty good leverage with a bet too. I mean, if he wants to check raise, it's going to cost him, you know, he's going to make it like 14k or something. It's going to cost him a fair chunk of his stack. Even if he wants to check call, you know, with like ace jack or something, well, you know, he's out of position on a pretty dangerous board against a player who he perceives to be pretty aggressive. He's putting himself in a pretty tough spot by doing that. A lot of players don't want to go down that road and they just give up, and that's what he's done. So worked out well there with the 4s. Plan B that time. Queen 2 folded. Jack 7's close one, folded. We see Vegans open and get jammed by Doc Boom. Ace 7 open. Pick that one up. 6-7 suited open again next hand. Big blind defends. And we get this high card board, king, queen, queen. I think checking here is, I think betting here is best. The big blind's probably going to have a pretty wide range, and we get good leverage. We apply pressure. With 7 players left, we can apply a lot of pressure because of the bubble factor. And that's just, I think, pretty standard ICM stuff. And it's just a dry board where our range is good for that board. We have a strong range in our opponent's mind. We should have. I mean, this is pretty much the bottom of our range on this board. We do have a backdoor flush as well. Let's just bet it and take down the pot, and we do that. Queen 10 in the big. Obviously going to be defending here. Wouldn't hate a 3-bet. 4, 5, 6. He's got M10, so he's right in that pivot where we can apply pressure if we make it, 14. It's a quarter of his stack, and he's in a tough spot. Having said that, we're getting up better than 4-1 with a hand that plays pretty good post, so let's just do that. And he hasn't been a maniac. And we flop well, don't we, with bottom 2. So I go ahead and check. Certainly no need to donk lead here. We could check call, we could check raise. I like both options. I've decided to probably, what would I have done? I don't know. Well, I probably would have checked called, to be honest. I might have check raised as well if I think he's not going to fold an ace. And there's a chance that he doesn't fold an ace. I don't mind a check raise, but we happen to turn a pretty sexy card, don't we? That is the Queen of Hearts giving us a full house. I lead now. I think that's probably good. I think that the lead here is pretty good because he could check an ace on that board. Well, is he going to bet an ace on the turn? Let's think about this. He could have a king 10, 10 jack hand. That's probably going to call. He could have a hand like eights, which may call the turn and just think we're stubbing because he checked flop. He might peel one on the turn. He probably folds it, but he might peel and get a bit curious since he's, got, if he had, say, eights, he's got queens and eights, and he thinks that we wouldn't bet a 10. And so we're probably repping a queen, and we're just in the big blind, so we've got a wide range. So we might just be stubbing. He might just convince himself of a story like that and call. It's interesting now he calls, actually. I probably should have thought about this more. It looks like, and I think I would have been onto this at the time, it looks actually like, once he checks that flop, it looks actually a lot like he's got kings and jacks, kings or jacks, doesn't it? Looking at it now. He checks flop, but he calls turn. I just said eights or nines might call, but the big one that might call is actually kings or jacks, isn't it? So the river comes down an ace, and if he does check back flop with ace X, obviously that's a terrible card for us. But I don't know if he does check back ace X. He's not so deep that pot control, against a big blind especially, who's got a wide range. I mean, at this point, he's not that deep that he's like, oh my god, I don't want to go broke with ace 8 here. Going broke, the chance that we check raise and the chance that he checks and like king or a jack comes or some bad card on the turn, I think is enough to incentivize him to just bet and protect and maybe get value with his ace X here, since he's against just a big blind who can have a wide range. And so I think he probably does bet an ace on the flop most of the time, which leads me to believe that when he just calls turn, he either has a hand like jack queen or king queen that pot controlled flop, or he has kings or he has jacks. And he could, I guess, have king 10 as well. So when you're thinking about whether you want to value bet or check here, you're just trying to think of weigh it all up, the combinations. And I think betting here is definitely the better option. And I hope I did bet. Yeah, I bet. I probably could have gone slightly larger. I think that a lot of the time he's got kings, which is probably going to call. If he's got king 10, I think he's going to call because he's got two pair with a king kicker and he's going to sort of level himself and say that we might be stubbing. Even if he's got jacks, I think he's probably going to call because we're repping pretty thin now. We're just repping a full house with an ace and we're just in the big blind. So we could have, in his mind, a wide range like jack 9, 8, 9, or just air that's just stabbing. We could have king 9 and just stab as well. Although he would be losing to that now, but he probably doesn't anticipate us betting a king. He probably thinks we're going to just check and try to get to showdown with a king because we have two pair with a king kicker. And so I think if he's got kings or king 10 or jacks, he's going to call. If he's got a queen, it's obviously a chop. And like we said, we don't think he has that many aces because he probably bets flop, but he could. We definitely don't want to see a raise, but I don't think we're ever going to see a bluff here, to be honest. Like, I just don't see... If he has, say he had 9s, or like the bottom of his range here is probably 9s or 9-10. I guess, I mean, if it's just... It's so hard to, it's so hard. Imagine you got that hand. I mean, it's so hard just here on the river here to make it 20,000. Just put in like half your stack on a bluff, hoping your opponent was just going a bit wild and just barreling it off with, well, just stabbing with nothing because you check flop. Like, I guess it's not impossible, but... And so, yeah, he does call. And he had, what do you think he had? I'm going to guess kings, jacks. He could have had 10 jack, I guess, as well. That's one that I probably didn't mention that's worth mentioning. I guess he could have had 10 jack as well. He's called playing, you know, 2 pair aces and queens with a jack, so with a jack, obviously. So he just thinks that we're pretty full of it there. And that paid off for us. So we got good value with that hand, and we got I think we got the chip lead now, right? We've got the chip lead and we've got ace jack. So good times. And we see a open here from the cutoff, nutty. We're actually second in chips. The guy now next to us, unfortunately, the player sitting next to us has also got a big stack, and he's aggressive, but that's fine. We'll try and work some magic here. So we see nutty here call, open, and he's in the cutoff. So my default play would probably just be to 3-bet here, 5, 6, and if he does jam, call off. Having said that, I don't mind sometimes mixing it in with some calls here. Let's see what I did. I did call here. Yeah, I don't mind that because we've got a hand that's pretty strong and hits flops decently well. We keep in a lot of worse hands that nutty might be opening, and I think we have a pretty good edge on nutty anyway. So I don't mind seeing flops with him. He might overplay. He might make some mistakes. If we do 3-bet and he just shoves, it's not a great spot. I mean, we're doing pretty good equity-wise, but it is a fair chunk of our stack. You know, we would go from being virtually chip leader to virtually shortest. It's a pretty big swing in momentum. And I think just to avoid that sort of situation where if he jams like 8s and we're flipping, I just decided to small ball it, which I think is okay. And we get this pretty bad flop in terms of as bad as flops come. I mean, we've got a couple of backdoors, 3 and a 4 will give us a straight. King and queen will give us a straight. We've got no backdoor flush, 2 overs. I wouldn't hate a check call, but... And I wouldn't... I think I prefer a check raise over a check call, to be honest. Just because we get to end the hand quickly out of position and apply pressure. And, you know, if we hit an ace or a jack on the turn or a king or a queen, you know, we can either, you know, get tricky and check, or we can bet or whatever. But I think folding is fun as well. Just a change in momentum there, really, wasn't it? Dr. Boom opens there. They're pretty short stack from early. Just folded. Folded there. King 3. King Jack. Probably could have 3-bet there. I think that was to be honest, I think that was a play that was a bit game flow orientated. This guy's just opened. He's seen us be pretty active and he's seen vegans be pretty active. So I think when he opens, you know, and he's got a couple of stack sizes behind that can jam as well, I don't think he's going to be opening too loose. And when he opens and then opens again the very next hand, I feel like he's going to be pretty heavy towards value, like strong hands here. He's not going to be opening like ace deuce here, I don't think, or like king 9 or something. I feel like he's thought, well, I've just got away with the steal. If I go for it again, I've got these aggressive guys behind me and some shortish stacks that might just jam. Like, I'm just going to wait here. I don't want to push the envelope. So that's why I've sort of a game flow type fold there. Having said that, he did fold. But he did get jammed on by Dr. Boom, who's been pretty solid and had a pretty good stack to squeeze jam there. So maybe a 3-bet. I mean, well, it would have put us in. That's the other reason as well. I mean, I should probably mention that. The other reason, well, is for folding that King Jack is exactly what just happened. If we 3-bet here to 13, I mean, we probably have to call off versus Dr. Boom and this rookie guy. So we could probably fold to Wooland if he jams. He's been pretty tight too, so I would. But we probably have to then call off because we make it 13 and this guy jams for like, 43 at 4 or whatever. I mean, it's like 30 to call and there's just a ton out there. We only need like 33% equity or something, 2 to 1. We've got King Jack. We wouldn't be folding. It just puts us in but it's not a great spot. So I think folding there is okay. But I wouldn't hate a 3-bet, but I think it would be a bit sort of spewy aggression in my opinion. I think there's just better spots. Interesting, he does open again. So maybe he is just a stealing freak. Maybe he does open a lot. He doesn't defend though. He's folded again there in the big blind. Jack 8 off here, obviously going to call. We're getting a good price here, 6.5 to 1. I haven't got a great hand, but we'll see how things pan out here. We get a bet and a raise. Obviously just going to fold that one. Nutty's going to chip up there. A jam here from the rookie. Vegans, again, this Vegans guy, he's 3-bet and folded again, so he does seem to be a bit of a mover. And I think that's why I folded the King 8 there. It's just funny, it's one of those hands where if I open here, I'm not going to, like, if I get 3-bet by Vegans, he's been aggressive and he's on the button, I'm just like, no, I'm sorry, sir. I'm probably just going to 4-bet this time. So I thought rather than get myself in that difficult situation, I would be thinking now, with him behind and the short stacks, I'm probably generally hedging towards open tight, but 4-bet light. Open tight, 4-bet light. The mantra is the mantra I'd be using. So that would definitely classify as, well, I mean, that was a little bit, not a tight open. That would be a little bit loose. But if I had opened like King 10 and then he 3-bet, I would probably 4-bet. King 8 is pushing it a bit. But he does appear to be quite aggressive. Wow, look at that. That's what I'm talking about. He gets check raised by Doc and goes with a 3-bet. Doc Boom 2-bets the flop. He 3-bets. Doc Boom 4-bet shoves, and now he folds. That's pretty sick. That's exactly what I was saying, the situation that I feel that we want to avoid is that sort of spewy spot. I just don't think that's necessary. I mean, Doc Boom hasn't been that out of control. He is in the big blind. I think Doc Boom is just going to fold a lot if he hasn't got a piece. I don't think you can assume that he's just check raising on the ace-10 board, trying to rep off enough. And so I just don't think. And he does, look at that, he puts in like half his stack as well almost. Yeah, that's exactly sort of what I was just saying. I think is a little bit of sort of spewy aggression there. It's just not necessary. And it's cost Vegans a chunk of his stack there. He tries to steal now. Now he's getting a bit annoyed, you know. He's just tried a 3-bet on the flop, hasn't worked. Now his steal hasn't worked. Just probably getting a little bit annoyed. But he does seem aggressive, which is not a bad thing, but see if we can't take advantage of his aggression at some point. Have to fold to that jam. Jam and a call. And Kings holds up against ace-5. And we go to 6-handed play. Love 6-handed play. Love Queen 10. Let's hit him with a 3-bet. Pow, there it is. You knew that one was coming. Nutty's been opening at a reasonable frequency. Queen 10 off. Not a great hand to just peel with. I like this play here, actually. And I like the fact that we're going over after the big stack here, to be honest. Because I do think he might have the mentality like, well, I am the big stack now. And he's on a high. He's just won with Kings against ace-5. So I think he's just like, you know, the world is my oyster. I'm just going to raise here. And you guys are going to fold. Well, hang on a minute. No, we're not just going to fold. We're going to make you earn this one. You think you're just going to push us around with your big stack? Well, maybe you are because you called. And we've got an SPR of 2.5 on the flop. But that's okay. We've got a pretty good draw here. Well, I'm a positive guy, all right? I'm a positive guy. We've got a 10 high flush draw. We could be crushed. He could have a hand like ace jack with a diamond or king queen. Jack queen with a diamond. He could have some king x, but he can have, I think, a lot of ace x. He can have a lot of maybe even some suited connectors like 9-10. Maybe he's got a hand like 5s, but he just didn't want to get it all in pre. So we're definitely going to fire here, I think. I wouldn't hate checking, but the problem with checking is it makes it pretty easy for him to get to showdown. Like if he's got 6s here and you just, and we check back, he's probably going to get to showdown. if he's got a hand even like ace 10 and we check flop, he might get to showdown. And if he donks turn, like say the turn is a jack, well, maybe not a jack, but because we'd have a pretty good draw. But if the turn is an ace or a 9 or a 5 or something like that, and he donk bets, say the turn is an 8 of hearts and he bets into us, all of a sudden we got a pretty tough spot where we've only now got one card to hit a flush that might not even be good. So I think just betting here and just trying to take the pot down, continue to work with an uncapped range because we've been the pre-flop aggressor and continuing to tell the story on the flop